Hello and welcome to my new Circle Line Art School video, How to Draw a Realistic Eye. My name is Tom McPherson, and in this drawing I'm going to show you one way to draw a realistic eye. Obviously there are many ways of drawing, and this is just one. In this drawing I'm going to use some charcoal pencils and some erasers. I'll just draw a casual curve, and then along the side here I'll just draw a little area for the tear duct. And I'll just draw the lower curve to make a sort of almond shape for the eye. And now we just need a circle for the iris and then a smaller circle in the center for the pupil. And then that's the basic eye shape, and we'll move on from there. I'll just use an eraser to tidy up the drawing a little bit before I start using one of the charcoal pencils. Now these charcoal pencils make a nice soft line, but any soft pencil will do, any 4B, 6B pencil will do very well. So the next step is to start shading in the pupil, and I just do that lightly just to give a little indication about how dark it's going to be later on. And so now we can add in some other tones and textures using the charcoal pencil or your soft pencil. And to do that, I think it's quite useful sometimes just to not hold the pencil too firmly, but allow the pencil to create a variety of different marks just by the way that it runs across the paper, as it were. And you're allowing it to create subtle marks sometimes. Now to draw an eye you need an eye to look at. That would be the very best thing to do, and if not you need an image of an eye, and whatever image or source that you're using to draw from the eye, you need to look really carefully and to see little clues that will help you work out what you need to draw and what you don't need to draw. So for example, in this drawing some of the eyelashes are reflected into the iris of the eye, and I could draw those now because I've noticed them. And so for this style of drawing it's a good idea just when you notice something to draw the thing that you notice straight away, so that you can start making connections, and it's through making connections that you can create an image that's more interesting to look at from the viewer's point of view, because when they look at the drawing that you've made they'll see the connections that you saw as you were drawing it. The connections in this might be a variety of different types of mark and lines that I see, and I need to also be aware that as I draw it it's going to get a lot darker because the actual eye is quite dark, and I want the highlight within the eye to seem brighter, and the only way of doing that really is to make everything around it a little bit darker. So if you're using a soft pencil or a charcoal pencil, you can use your hands or your fingers just to smudge, and actually by smudging you can get a sort of mid-tone, a tone which isn't totally light or totally dark but somewhere in the middle. These mid-tones are very useful things to have in a drawing, and to be able to smudge your pencil marks to create them gives a certain level of subtlety and sketch-like lively quality to a drawing, which I think sometimes is good. Obviously a drawing like this, it's not trying to be photorealistic, it's just trying to draw what you see in a sketch-like way, and hopefully if we really draw what we see it will look quite realistic by the time that it's finished. At least that's the hope. And so within the eye I'm drawing I can see myself, and I'll just sketch in a little bit in tone so it's not totally an outline, a portrait. It is time also to draw some of the lines which aren't quite straight lines, but they sort of come and go. They're lines that sometimes are dark and sometimes are light, and they're the lines like spokes of a wheel from the pupil, the dark black hole in the middle of the eye, to the edge of the iris, the circumference of the iris. Now these lines, it would be good to have them quite gentle and sort of like almost like swimming lines, lines which aren't sharp and razor sharp like ruler lines, but lines that sort of dip in and out of focus, because I want to create that sort of sense that the eye is in focus, but there are elements of the eye which are out of focus, and that will hopefully create a sense of depth and a momentary feel to the drawing. And so at this stage the drawing's quite lively, but it's a little bit bitty because I'm just drawing little parts that I notice and trying to make connections like I was mentioning before. And so I guess the next step is just to try and form more connections and unify the picture by using more smudging. And so with this drawing I'm drawing it in real time so that it's not speeded up, so that you can actually see the whole process of the drawing. And now the next step really is to just keep looking and try and create a tonal range that makes sense, so that if something is dark, the thing next to it needs to be the right tone in relation to it. So tone is just how light or dark something is. And really with a tonal drawing like this, you need to make sure that all of the tones work together. So at this stage where I've got quite a lot of things going on, I can start to link and think that if this area here is a midtone, is something next to it either lighter or darker than it is itself. So either it's lighter or it's darker. I'm just using the white of the paper. It's a cartridge paper that I'm using. But just going back to the tones, just trying to make sure that make the tones readable so that each tone works in relation to the other tones within the drawing. And it's always an enjoyable part of a drawing, I think, where you can start to make connections in a very easy, straightforward way, because you're just observing what you can see and you don't need to think too much. The connections just start to form by themselves. At this stage, there's also a sort of balance that's needed to be created, which is the balance between the amount of detail that you can see and what's appropriate to put into the drawing that you're making, because you're really wanting to make a drawing that works. And if you draw everything that you see, it might be too much and it might get a little bit too complicated or confusing. Confusing is probably a better word than complicated. It'll get too confusing for the person who's looking at the drawing to really understand what you're seeing. So as I complete this drawing, I'm really trying to make those judgments about what I can see, what is necessary to put in and what I can leave out. So things that I've noticed but perhaps would just clutter the drawing so that I won't put them in. But because we're using a soft pencil, charcoal pencil, you can actually put in at this stage a bit too much detail, and even not really using an eraser so much, but just using your fingers and smudging it. So you can keep putting in a little bit too much detail and then smudging it, and in that way you get a sort of layered effect where you have marks on top of marks, and it's a sort of well-worn image with marks which have some depth to them, which I think is suitable for this style of drawing. And so at this stage I'm really going to use my fingers a lot and just smudge in quite a lot of what we've done so far. But by smudging it in, it's going to turn the darker tones into mid-tones. So I'm going to need to use my pencil to create some more darker lines on top. So the dark becomes mid, and then the darker lines come on top, and that creates a layered effect. And then the whites of the eyes generally are never really white, apart from in sort of photographs of celebrities and things like that. But if you look at somebody's eyes, the whites of the eyes generally are a tone. They're not the brightest thing. So for this drawing as well, I'll make the whites of the eyes slightly mid-tone. And to do that, it's probably best just use your finger, or you could use a razor. And so the next step in this drawing would be to draw the eyelid. And the eyelid needs to be the right sort of distance to enable it to look right. And I think that that's just something that you need to be able to see and judge if it looks right or not. That's the best way really of learning to draw, is to be able to judge your own drawings in a sort of positive way yourself, to see what works and what doesn't, so that you can make the corrections when you need to make them because you've noticed them yourself. So hopefully this eyelid is about in the right place, so I'll leave it where it is, and I'll put in a little bit of indication to the eyelashes as well. And so for this drawing, the lower eyelid isn't so visible as the upper eyelid, so the upper eyelid will have a nice clear line to it. And also for this image, the upper eyelid will be somewhat darker than the lower eyelid. And then on the edge of the lower eyelid will be the eyelashes, which go along a line. Now these eyelashes on the lower line might seem more isolated than the ones above, which will be much more dense. But because I'm using this soft charcoal pencil, or if you're using a soft pencil, we can probably smudge out some of the areas that we don't want to be in total focus. Because when you look at something, really, you can only see one thing in focus at a time. And so for this drawing, which is just of an individual eye, I'm going to try and make it so that the actual centre of the eye is the thing that you're drawn towards, and everything else is slightly out of focus because your attention's drawn to the stare of the eye, looking into the eye, rather than looking around the edge of the drawing, which is something that you might want for a different drawing of a different subject matter, but maybe not for this one. And so just to complete this drawing, again, it's about trying to forge connections, make connections between the different tonal ranges, and making sure that the viewer, the person who's going to look at your drawing, is going to look in the areas that you want them to look at. And you probably need to stand back from your drawing and see how it's going and try to make some judgments to decide what you need to do and when you need to finish. It's a very difficult thing. I often have people ask me about when to finish a drawing. It's very difficult, but sometimes you just get that sense that you need to stop. Art's very intuitive, so that sometimes you just need to listen to yourself, and if you think you need to stop, I would just stop. And because it's art, you can always just do another drawing later on, so that you've got a record of the drawing that works to an extent in the way that it is, and you stopped when you thought you should stop. So for this drawing, now, I think I'll stop this drawing now. I hope you enjoy this drawing, and I hope especially that you find it useful for your own drawing. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Circle Line Art School, for many more art videos. I hope you like this video, and please give it a thumbs up if you like it, and leave a comment. It's very useful for me to get comments back. And thank you very much for your support, and see you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.